Thanks so much for joining us on the podcast. You recently included me in a project that we're going to talk about later in the episode, something super exciting involving an orchestra from Toronto called Tafelmusik. And we're going to also bring in a gentleman from the orchestra and have a conversation about that. But before we get to that, I'm just super curious. I don't really know your invitation into magic. How did this all come to be?
Well, like all magicians, there's various stories of the origin. None of them are terribly interesting. They're pretty cliche. I've been on again, off again into magic as long as I can remember. Since a kid, it was just one of those things that I did. And the short version is I was doing, restaurants and small corporate events. And the short version is I eventually heard about something called the Fringe Festival, which is a theater festival. And I saw a show and I was enamored with this idea of people coming to see the show. Because up until that point, like most working magicians, you go to the venues and they're less than ideal. But this idea of this small black box theater where people are there and you got them for like an hour. And that was the point where I really threw away all the stuff I was doing and said, all right, I'm writing a show from scratch. What do I want to do? And I think that was like in 2009, 8 or 9. And that was sort of, I would say, the turning point when I started taking it a bit more seriously, I guess.
And I actually saw one of your Fringe shows. So where in the timeline was that? Because that was the first time I think we met. Was that?
Yeah, that was probably that first run. Yeah.
Man, that's nuts. Did you, when you did the restaurants and things, did you have that character, or is that something that developed for that show?
Yeah, definitely a slow evolution. And still, I would say, if I'm doing restaurants, I always say, if you're doing close up, have good material and be normal, be a human being and be approachable, and you're doing fine. So, but I always felt like if you're on stage, you should have an angle of some kind. And like many people, I'm still working on it, trying to figure out what that is. But I was heading towards, I guess, a little bit of a dark angle, not crazy darkness, but a little fun. And it was a friend, James Allen, a magician who I think came to see a show, and he just texted me saying, you're pure evil wrapped in Mr. Rogers' sweater. And him saying those words, I was like, that's it. And it's so much easier once you have that. Everything can feed into that, and it makes it so much easier,
Yeah, it's not often that magicians tend to go years without sort of coming up with their identity, and it seems like you did that first.
Again, this is still 10 years into doing
yes
magic.
Yes, fair point. Well, going back, who are some of your early influences?
I've always loved Penn and Teller. The big guys, David Copperfield. One of my earliest memories, I think, is my mom plopping me in front of a television and just saying, "Watch this. This guy's good." And it was like David Copperfield doing that double pole levitation.
Oh yes.
80s,
yeah,
yeah. 80s, totally.
I always wanted to do that illusion, FYI. I saw that. That wasn't my first Copperfield one, but that was absolutely was. Yeah, Copperfield was my introduction to magic as well. What about locally?
Yeah, I kind of I'm somewhat isolated. I'm not in a magic hub, but when I was young, I started trying to get into, there's a Hamilton Magic Club, which I would visit regularly. And there's a couple local guys, Brian Michaels. I don't know if you ever knew Brian Michaels.
Didn't have a conversation with him, but I certainly did know of him. Yeah.
I mean, he really took me under his wing and showed me how to make a living doing this. He's one of those magicians that really flew under the radar,
Yeah, he sadly passed away way too young.
Yeah, he did. That was several years ago now.
Yeah, and certainly a gentleman that really understood the business side of it. Him and his wife are a fantastic at marketing. So what a great influence. And so this was all happening in high school and stuff. What happened?
Yep. Actually, another magician, Chris Bruce, who I think he was doing restaurants in Burlington, and he was one of the people who, when he stopped doing restaurants, he called me and said, "Hey, do you want a gig?" And that was in I think grade 10 or 11. I probably started doing that. So quite a while ago, and did that for many years.
It's great place to work out new material. And
Great place to be bad. Yes.
Yeah.
Finding a place to be bad for a while is totally.
absolutely. Well, then what would you describe as like the next step?
Well, Fringe Festival really focused me to work on a stage show. And after that, I felt like I had a solid 40-minute show and did mostly corporate stuff, but still kept dabbing my toe in the theater world. Every time the Fringe Festival circuit would come around, I'd do something new. And it was actually during the Fringe Festival, I met a director named Luke, and I consulted on a show he was doing in Hamilton. He needed a magic consultant, and I was helping him with this show. It was actually a cool piece about H.P. Lovecraft, the horror author, and it was just they wanted some little magical moments in it. And we were hanging out one day, and I mentioned, because there was a bit of it was H.P. Lovecraft, for those who don't know, is a famous horror author. So the play was a little dark, and I said I'd always loved the idea of doing a theatrical seance, like just a theater show that was a seance. And I found it. He always wanted to be a Ghostbuster. So we said, let's make something. And we made this theater show called Seance. And it got a lot of attention, and it kind of got bigger and bigger, and did several runs of that in historic venues and some theaters. And that show, I think, did propel me towards doing more. The little TV stuff that I've done is really came from doing that show.
What a unique performance. We used to hear or read about it. I'd say, about these kinds of shows way back in the day, and they've sort of been out of the scene for a long time. These Paul Reuter, my mentor, would talk about ghost shows and things, not on the same quite vein, but that kind of play on the eerie, the spook. I love this. I would love to see this show.
Yeah, unfortunately, getting people in a confined space and having them hold hands in the dark is sort of frowned upon these days, but hopefully sooner than later it'll come back.
Well, do you have any formal acting training? How does that play into this?
No. I mean, I went to school for film and television, so the behind the scenes, I think I understood how important writing and directing is when putting together a piece. But no, the performance end of things, that's something I think I would love to, again, when we can do improv and get together with strangers, that's something I would love to work on more, actually.
I agree. Like Graham, obviously co-host of this podcast, he is an incredible improv guy, and it sort of brings to the forefront how much I should improve that muscle. And that's one of those things that you really have to do.
Yeah, you have to do. You have to learn by doing. Totally.
So yeah, that's super interesting, because your presence is unique. How would you describe your presence?
I still have a hard time describing it. I would say I'm unassuming, I would say seemingly approachable, but it has like a slight dark edge. And there's actually, I will share this with your listeners if they may not be interested in this or not, but when I was working on trying to figure out who I am on stage, which I think everyone should, it's a tough thing to do. I read, I'm blanking on his name, Structural Concepts in Magic. What's the, Ascanio.
Okay. Yes.
I feel bad I'm blanking on this. We'll edit this out. Anyway, he had a idea when looking for your character is just get together. Well, his idea, he's a close-up performer, and whatever your personality is when you're entertaining friends at a party, that's who you should be. But he also had this idea of just get together with friends and just ask them, make a list. What do you think of when you think of me? And it sounds really egotistical. It's sort of an uncomfortable thing to do, but do it. And then look. And if you see things that overlap on other people's lists, that's something is already there. And focus in on that. So I started doing that, and it sounds silly, but I would look at movies and even things I remember thinking about Disney's The Jungle Book. There's that scene with King Louie, where they're singing "Oopie Doo, I Want to Be Like You," and it's such a fun, happy moment. But the undertones of that song are so creepy. If you haven't listened to it recently, go listen to it.
Recently, sorry.
No, it's about this guy wanting to become human so he can have fire. It's like really unsettling. But the idea of juxtaposing that super fun with this creepy undertone was like, that's, I want to get at that. So.
Oh, wow. First of all, I have to just acknowledge that bit of wisdom that you just passed on. Wow, I've never heard that before. The concept of identifying yourself and ask like people around you. I get some great advice.
Yeah, it's very useful. Again, a little painful and awkward, but in the long run, it definitely helps.
Yeah, absolutely. On that same kind of vein, I won't deviate too long, but I had a conversation on a ship with one of the best comedians that I've ever seen, and I asked him, like, what do you do? What is your process for this? And his process, in some similar tone, was like just to start writing out all the major stuff that you have in your life, those big bullet points, and then take them one step deeper, and then one step deeper, and then just start crossing stuff out, and what resonates with you most, and then go off of that. It helps by eliminating.
Totally. And then you just lean into those ones, and then when you're making a new piece, it's so much easier to be like, well, what would this person do? Or how would they stand? How would they say this? What would their props look like? And it all just starts, it's still work, but it makes it so much easier.
Totally. And all of this, in character that you've developed has gotten you on some really cool TV stuff. AGT and Fool Us being the two that most listeners would obviously know most. How were those experiences? Both individual, I'm sure.
Amazing. I mean, Fool Us, I feel like, you've done Fool Us. So many people have done Fool Us. I mean, it's sort of a rite of passage. It's just something I just wanted to do. And I still remember getting that email that we want you. And it was like, oh man. So, that experience was awesome. I have nothing bad to say about it. I don't know if you feel the same way, but it was
100%. They wanted to make sure we all did the best we could do.
Totally. They just want magic to look good and magicians to look good. AGT, also overall a very good experience, although, as I'm sure you know, the goal of that show is not necessarily the same. They just need warm bodies on stage. And if you do good, great. They'll lift you up. If you don't, it's okay. Someone else is just waiting to come in. So, but I had so much good stuff still come out of that experience. I did 2 rounds. The first one, amazing. Second one, didn't go great, but didn't go horribly. Just didn't go great. And just kind of that sort of clip disappeared, which is fine. But met some great people. Yeah, it was great.
And did you customize your routine? Is it a routine that you've always been doing?
Again, this is long story short, the first piece I did was actually right out of my seance show, and it went really well. I had to tweak a few things for the show, obviously, because it's NBC and it's a big army of people behind it. They really wanted me to lean into the paranormal, spooky angle. And that was the big problem the second round is you need an image and a package to do well on that show. And if you have an authentic image and talent, amazing. But if you don't have an authentic image, they will make one. And I kept trying to explain to them, I can be creepy and dark and mysterious without just saying I have the ability to talk to dead people.
Right.
And that's what they wanted. They wanted me to be able to I hear voices. And if anyone's interested in going back and watching the clip, I was very guarded in all the interviews. Whenever someone said, do you believe in ghosts? I was always careful to say, not really, but I love Hitchcock. I love horror, blah, 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 blah. And when the time came, I saw Terry Crews say, so do you believe in ghosts? And I saw a clip of me go, yeah. And they just took a yeah from another part of the conversation. So they'll get it. Any way they can.
Yeah, storytelling with editing is an inspiration for sure. And they've got a 3-minute segment to fill. So, that's how they're looking at it. I get it, but that's complicated.
Yes. And sorry, I got derailed a second, but long story short, they wanted me to do a very seance-y piece for the second bit, which was something I'd never really done before. But they said, we'll make this look great. And I was like, I don't want to go in front of however many million people on live television doing something that I've never done before. So I really pushed to do something I knew inside and out. And in hindsight, that wasn't maybe really right for the show and it just didn't work. But I'd also rather to go out doing something I like and know. If I just gave in and said, sure, I'll do this thing, and it was a disaster, I would have just kicked myself. Like, why did I let them talk me into doing that? So
Totally. Yeah, I feel like if it was me, either way, I would look at it with guilt. I should have done this, or I should have done that.
I know. Yeah.
Well, how do you keep that creative muscle working? Do you have?
Oi, this past, I'm sure a lot of people can relate. This past year and a half, it's been very challenging, especially last year. Like for the first time in, maybe my whole life, like I had zero interest in working on magic for like last spring, summer, even to the fall. And I wanted to want to do it, but I don't know if you felt the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. I've enjoyed the conversation about magic and with magicians and stuff, but the like virtual performance has not been my cup of tea. It's always been stage. So
yep. I hear you. I even got new magic books, and they still haven't been read. I'm like, I just don't have. And I think it was like, part of it was to what end? Until you know you're going to be on stage using this.
Right.
How do you get excited about it? So I don't know.
Yeah, it's difficult because we're both in the same category. Like we've done this for a long time. Like my whole life identity is sort of structured around this. And now it's been the longest period, 2 years. I've not done a live show, which is coming to an end soon for both of us, I guess. Mm-hmm. So it certainly is weird times.
I'm feeling it now that there are, things bubbling on the horizon. It's like, we'll get there.
Absolutely. Well, and before we jump into the big topic, because there's lots to talk about with this incredible music and magic project that's coming up, I want to know, just if looking back at your career now, one piece of advice that you've been given that might stand out.
Oi, that's a good question. If I had more time to think about this, I might have a better answer, but I would say ask yourself why you're doing what you're doing. That's a hard one to answer, but I think a lot of magicians stop thinking too quickly. I think just push it a couple more layers, and don't just do a trick because you know the trick. Like, ask yourself, why would you do this trick? What motivates everything? And they're hard questions to answer, and you won't get all the answers, but the more you get, the better the piece will be, I think.
That's really great advice. Well, I'm looking forward to sharing a discussion about this music and magic project that I was thrilled you've included me on. Now I'm looking forward to sharing the details. So let's sort of unravel it for the audience. Tell us what is the project first.
Great. So there is a baroque orchestra in Toronto called Tafelmusik. For those of you who don't know what baroque music is, it's a movement of classical music in the 1700s. So like Bach, Vivaldi, Handel, and they're a really talented orchestra. I mean, Juno's music, right?
I'm shaking my head.
Yeah,
believing yes.
Yes, very, very, very accomplished, and they are very smart. They realized, like early in the pandemic, we're not doing concerts anymore. We're now making streaming concerts. So we're like we're filming all our concerts, and I'm always amazed at those people who can like pivot, so quickly. Anyway, long story short, there's a member of the orchestra named Marco who we've learned has had a fascination with magic for a long time, and Tafelmusik also has a history of doing multimedia projects in the past, and he had the idea of combining music and magic in a project, and they reached out to me and said, would you be interested in working on this? And it was, actually kind of early in the pandemic when we had nothing going on, and I said, yeah, I would. And we started developing it, and then you and I worked, you created the Oh Wow
Halloween special magic.
Yeah. Halloween special, which was amazing. Is it still available to watch?
It's still online. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it was, your performance that was incredible. So
thanks. Yeah, that was so fun to be a part of, and it turned out so great. And so I mentioned to you, you should touch base with Ryan to see if he could get involved in this. And I guess they did. And then here we are a year later, however long it's been.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a huge project.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know the total number of individuals, but there was a series of days that we were in Toronto at Pie in the Sky Studios filming, and like just the team there must have been over 20 or so. Like there's a big of the orchestra and the crew and everything. It's a big project.
Yeah, and it snowballed. Initially, I think they were just going to have it as a sort of a small project, and they realized, oh, this could be very cool, and it's bigger than we thought. And I think that's when they ended up calling you to bring on board. And yeah, it was a big project, still ongoing, still being edited, but
it sure is. Yeah, riddled with lots of complexities, COVID complexities as well. That was a couple like the filming dates and things. Unfortunately, had to move several times, and just all because of COVID. But in fact, we ended up filming your segments we were going to do in studio, but we ended up filming those on location in your place, which was amazing. You've got this perfect set.
Yes, the attic of our barn, which was so hot. When was that? May or June? I don't even remember now.
I think it was June. Yep,
June. But a smoldering attic. But thank goodness, because there's so many moving parts in this. I know they had 2 days of shooting at a studio, but it would have just been a night like crazy to get all the magic in as well.
Yeah, because it's a long program that features obviously performances from you as well as performances from the orchestra, and it's really an opportunity for magicians and musicians, of course, but magicians to see a unique collaboration, because it's not just like performances. You've interwoven them together with the storytelling of the whole concert.
Yeah, there's sort of magic vignettes, I would say. There's full-on music performances, so there'll be pieces. It's probably over about an hour in length, the whole program. And then we are also able to find historical figures and sort of weave, I wouldn't say a narrative, but just sort of a portrait piece of this magician and musician and what would happen if they came together. And it was a lot of fun.
I don't know, of late, as I get older, I've really appreciated the historical aspect of just life in general and magic as well. And I was unaware of the magician that you've brought to my attention in this. And it's learning about Isaac Fox was incredible.
Yes, I didn't really know much of him either. This was Marco who discovered him, and I guess he performed at the same time as Handel. And it was also really cool. We found out he used to perform with a contortionist, and we were chatting. We're like, wouldn't it be cool if we could just get a contortionist to perform in this? And we did. A friend of a friend I know who's a male contortionist, and I say male because there aren't a lot of male contortionists. I think they're usually female.
It's true, and they refer to them as posture masters. I love that little historical as well. Yeah, posture master. Do you have any music training yourself?
I played violin for most of my childhood. I always say I did not get very good at it because I would practice magic instead of practicing music. So I have I played in an orchestra for many years, so I have a deep appreciation for classic music. And it was really nice I'm still grateful Saturday mornings that I don't have to get up and go to orchestra practice for 3 hours. But it is a really wonderful feeling to be sitting in a group of people and having that music surround you. And it was really nice to be at the shoot in the rehearsal hall, just to be sitting in that room and having,
It certainly is one thing that magic is so unique, is that it's so isolated, and music is frequently about collaboration.
Yes. 100%. I always find magic is that much more stronger once you can collaborate with others and bounce ideas, And this was a great COVID project in the planning process, as we could just get together over Zoom and bounce ideas over. It was another sort of logistical challenge to actually film it, but we did it.
Absolutely. And tons of talented people. We hope everybody can tune in. Well, let's bring in Marco. I'm curious to share his perspective. Well, I want to welcome Marco Cera to the podcast. Marco is from Tafelmusik, and we're going to learn more about the program, how it came to be, his background, and so much more. Marco, I want to thank you so much for being here on
Thank
the
you.
podcast. If it's okay, I want to start at the beginning and just to give everybody kind of an idea about yourself, how long you've been in the industry, and a look at your background and career.
Yeah, I come from a family of musicians, so I started very early to fool around with music instruments, and I studied principal the oboe, which is a woodwind instrument, and I've been freelancing since I was a teenager, basically. And I came to Canada in 2007. I won an audition for Tafelmusik, and so that was my Canadian adventure. And yes, I've been in the music industry for a long time, and with this wonderful orchestra, Tafelmusik, my job is not only just playing the oboe, but I've been involved in programming music and creating a show, multimedia show like the one we created together.
And sort of just give everybody a kind of a view of some of like what Tafelmusik does over the course of the year. Obviously, not the pandemic time, but in a normal year, what does it look like for Tafelmusik?
So the orchestra has a season in town, and we played more than 80 concerts a year, plus touring and some teaching, collaboration with other opera company, and so it's pretty busy.
Yeah, you touring as well. When we were filming in Toronto, had a conversation with a handful of people, and I was not aware of some of the travels that you've done as well with Tafelmusik, literally around the world. So
Yeah, around the world, basically.
Yeah.
In the last year, in the last 10 years, I've been working with the orchestra. We have been all over the places, from China to South America and North America, Canada, of course, and Europe. So yeah, it's pretty intense.
And Nick is got a violin background as well, which we chatted about. I think many magicians, I think myself included, at the beginning started with a little music background. Had you been part of a music concert before, Marco? Has this ever been something Tafelmusik has collaborated with before, magic?
Magic is the first time, I guess. Tafelmusik is kind of, in the last 10 years, we have been presenting a lot of programs where we collaborate with other artists or other musicians from other backgrounds, but never magic. So this is the very first time, I think.
And Nick, did the music experience come in handy?
Oh yes, 100%. Yes, it's a short answer. I mean, yeah, music was a huge part of my life growing up, and I would say now I know enough to know how much I don't know, but have a deep appreciation of it. It was really I just loved, especially after, this past year and a half of not seeing live shows or live music, but just the recording, just being in the room with the orchestra and just being surrounded by that wall of sound was wonderful.
It sure was. For me, I have zero music understanding, so I definitely wish I had more education and theory and all that behind me in both stages here, because it's definitely its own lingo, like magic. It's got its own everything, and it was certainly fun to learn musically along the way, from my perspective, and historically as well. We were introduced to some historical characters, which we'll get into in a minute. But you touched on something, Nick, I want to ask Marco about, and that's the COVID pandemic has obviously impacted like everybody. And so, Marco, how has Tafelmusik adapted during COVID?
Yeah, I think Tafelmusik made the right choice to keep going and find other ways to present music and to keep employing the new musicians. So we have been doing a lot of online show and so streaming concerts that were received very well from the audience. And so I think we are keep doing that for next season and maybe introducing some small live performances. But it for sure it created other opportunities to you know get more view from like international audience. So I think as an orchestra, Tafelmusik really gave an example to other groups on how to react to this pandemic time.
Yeah, and you have an active YouTube channel. People should absolutely check out. We'll make sure to leave the link in the description. But it's media has been a part of what you've been doing for a long time. Do you think it's going to the virtual stuff will stay even when the pandemic?
Yeah, I hope that the opportunity that we created with these virtual shows and concerts will stay, so that, that people could watch the concerts anyway, even if it is a live concert, they could enjoy the concert from abroad and from their couch at home with a glass of wine. So
Right. Well, let's sort of dive into a little bit about the show as well. If you don't mind, tell us a little bit about the Music and Magic concert, Marco. And I'm
yeah,
curious also how you met Nick as well. So
yeah.
tell us what people can expect.
I've been fascinated with magic since I was little, and I grew up in this little town in Italy where there was one illusionist magician, and I would bump into him, for example, in a cafe or something. And he always had a trick ready for me, and I was thinking that combining music and magic would be a good just a good idea. And I researched a little bit, and there is not much available, regarding like a show or a magic show that is based on music, or music that interact with magic. So I was trying to find out how we could do that, and I bumped my question was there must have been a magician in the 18th century that can match the music that Tafelmusik is playing, since Tafelmusik is specialized in this early repertoire. And I came across this name, this Mysterio Isaac Fox. So I started to investigate a little bit and see what the possibility were, and when we could reach like a joint point. And I found out that this magician was operating in London in the 18th century, same time of this other famous composer, George Friedrich Handel. And not only they performed in the same city at the same time, but in the same theater. So that was a big, big exciting news that I found, and so that was what started the whole process.
Yeah, it was fun to personally. It was fun to learn about Isaac Fox. I was not aware of this historical figure. Were you aware, Nick, of Isaac Fox?
Peripherally, like once we started researching him, I did know the like posters and illustrations of him, but not that much. But I did hear something interesting recently, and I don't know if this is true, but in Harry Potter, Dumbledore's Phoenix is named Fox, and I heard that it's a good chance that J.K. Rowling named him after Isaac Fox. I don't know if that's 100% true, but I thought that was kind of interesting.
That is cool. That would be super fascinating if that connector was true.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the fascinating things I remember reading and discovering through this with both of you, is that he basically, the literature that was provided made it seem and sound like he was the first one sort of to elevate magic from the streets to the stage. And so really that would be awesome if that tidbit you just shared was true. Marco, have you ever performed a magic trick?
So I tried, and with not very good results, and mostly, for my kids. But I enjoy more watching than trying to perform. I think there is a lot of memory involved when you play, when you, am I correct, when you perform a magic trick, and I'm not good at memorizing numbers. I,
Says the
I
guy who probably has Vivaldi's Four Seasons memorized.
Yeah, that's easy. Memorizing music is easy, but memorizing numbers and keeping in mind, no, it's not my. So I don't know, like looking at you, Nick, when you performed in front of the orchestra. I was trying to figure out how you can keep in mind, every element, and every musician, and every number, and I would just screw up everything.
How, Nick, how similar are, since you have both skill sets, or have done both, what would you say, is it similar in performance? Is there big variations from performing music versus magic?
It's definitely related. I think learning music, if anything, I think it taught me how to practice and how to isolate problems and focus in on that. It also, uh, I was a really quiet kid, and it was music that forced me to get in front of people and do a thing. So I think without that, I probably wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. But I mean, there's also, Ryan, you'll know in magic, there are like natural beats and rhythms, and they're very much. I'd say they're cousins, magic and music.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And I also like both require creating habits, which takes time and effort and commitment and rehearsal and practice. So they definitely share similarities on that front. And I guess performing wise, we both read the audience, but magicians most times, I guess, I'm curious and open to. I would love to hear what you have to say. But it's two-way communication frequently. Obviously, magic is interactive and involving others and script based. So would you say that was maybe one of the bigger differences? Is that untrue statement? What would you say?
I mean, I would say that true. Marco, you might correct me on this, but I feel like there's that saying in magic that it only exists in the mind of the audience. And I guess you could say the same thing about music, although once you have it captured and recorded, it does sort of exist. It's done. And I feel like magic without the audience, it just doesn't, you know,
Yeah,
Yeah,
doesn't quite work.
I totally agree, to this. Um, for me, when you play a concert, I always say that the 50% of the success of the concert comes from the audience. So that if the audience react, you can feel it when you are playing, and it's like a sort of exchange of um,
energy.
almost ideas, and yeah, totally. When go around the world and perform, you have different reactions from different audience, and I feel like when we perform in Toronto, the concert has something more because the audience know us a lot better, and so at the end, it's a it's always give and receive, I think. So I agree.
Oh, that's a great point. Yeah, you touched on something really valuable there about international audiences being slightly different everywhere, the responses and things. I agree to that. So let's sort of give everybody sort of an idea of what the program is and what they would expect to see tuning in on October 28th for the launch. Marco, sorry.
Okay, so it's basically is a film, 1 hour film, where you will see an orchestra performing, Nick reacting and to the music and entertaining the orchestra as well. And where we explored what is possible to do with music and magic, how they are related. And for me, it was fantastic because I learned not only about magic, but also about music, because I tried to understand does music has also a component of illusion, and I found out that there were techniques that composers used even in the Baroque period that had a component of illusion, so tricking the listener, and so that what we are exploring also in this show. See where music, if music can also be illusion. And the great idea that Nick had, it was also to compare this auditory illusion and with some visual illusion. And so maybe Nick, you want to explain what we did there with your visual illusion, to explain music illusions.
Yeah, I don't want to give too much away, but we did discover that there are really cool auditory illusions that musicians use to trick their viewers, and then we figured out visuals and tricks so we actually explain how these things work. And I did want to say that I think Marco was right when he said it's a film, because I know magicians especially will hear, oh, streaming concert or streaming show, and they have this idea of what this is, but it really is like a standalone film that I really think it's enjoyable to watch. Like I'm pretty proud to be part of this. I think people are really gonna enjoy it.
100% agree with you. And on that same topic, then let's talk about some of the people responsible and behind, like, for making all of this. Some of the key players. Would you mind sharing some of the? Well, Marco, would you mind?
Yeah. So of course we have the orchestra that is a group of 17 instrumentalists, and Nick performing his magic, and studying this story of Isaac Fox, we learned that he was performing with posture master, so a contortionist. And so we decided to include also a moment where we recreate in our minds what could happen if George Friedrich Handel and Isaac Fox would perform together in the same moment. And so we decided to hire a contortionist with us to give this idea of to recreate a little bit our idea of a union between Isaac Fox and George Friedrich Handel. So we have a fantastic contortionist. Help me with his name, Nick.
Quintin Mello.
Mello, yeah.
Yeah.
And he just created a astonished performance. So we were recording live with the orchestra and with Quinten doing his moves. And it was so hard just to concentrate and play the music and not watching what he was doing. And it was just a fantastic moment that we experienced there. The other fantastic moment is when Nick, when Nick is performing in front of the audience, of the orchestra, and using basically the musicians as the audience. And of course, there is a sort of planning behind it, but the majority of musicians, they had no idea of what was going on. And it was a big surprise for them to be entertained by Nick.
It's so hard to speak in code. Like, we wish we could share a lot of these details. You really have to tune it and see, because there's really so much that unfolds over this hour. It really is a spectacular a concert magic show. And talk about, so obviously we filmed it over, there was two basic large filming chunks of time. One we recorded over at your place, Nick, and then the other, of course, with the full orchestra. Talk a little bit about that process, if you could, Marco.
We have been working hard for months with Nick and I to write a script and try to understand how to create this. And that was challenging also because it was during the pandemic. So the rules would change every month, basically, and restrictions. And so we had to find a sort of compromise and try to understand how to film the different sections. And it was really, I mean, I have no film movie experience at all, but I guess we had to use these techniques of recording different sections of the show in different moments and try to assemble everything at the end. In fact, my colleagues, the other musicians, are really, every time they talk to me, they have no idea of the final product, basically, because they were involved in shooting the music and reacting to the magic, but they don't have a full picture of what we created. So it will be a surprise for them to watch it.
Yeah, that's great. Marco touched on a couple of his highlights from the how about you, Nick? What are some of the highlights?
Highlights. Well, again, definitely just hearing the orchestra record was wonderful. One of the most challenging things, which you sort of touched on, was the pandemic was a great time to plan for projects, but very difficult to execute filming an orchestra of 17 and crew of 10, and it's really, really challenging. And we knew we wanted to have at least a couple interactive bits with an orchestra, which again with COVID is real hard. And Ryan, like, I know I've talked about this before, but like when you work on a new piece, like you get it to the point where you can put it on stage, and that's when the real work begins. And then just over countless performances, you figure out how to make it work, and then it's done. Where this was like, we had this idea, which we thought would be cool, and then we just did it with cameras and said, we got to get this in one go. And I felt like that was the moment I was most stressed about. But we got it captured. And again, it's hard to dance around what happens in that moment, but I don't even know how to explain it. But the moment that unfolds after the trick with the musicians, I think is one of my favorite parts of the program.
Yeah, my heart was racing for you because, like many magicians, I hate new material. So I totally understand the fear.
Plus,
And you just nailed it.
and plus having at that point it was June, so over a year of not performing at all, and then just being dropped into it. And add on that, it is a very weird, unnatural performing situation. I mean, you are with real people, the orchestra, who don't know what's happening, but everyone's masked. And they're used to performing, so all of a sudden they're the audience and they're not sure how they're supposed to respond. And it was just, I think stressful is an understatement, but we got it. We got it.
Absolutely, I could totally understand. I'm sure those listening can also understand the pressures of doing new material, let alone in front of such accomplished musicians and 9 cameras or whatever was there. Yeah, it certainly, you have to tune in and see just how amazing Nick did. So do check that out. How is it that people can tune in and watch, Marco?
So this show is premiering on October the 28th. And so you have to buy tickets through the Tafelmusik website. And I guess the orchestra offers to buy also like a digital pass for the entire season, but you can also buy the specific ticket for the show. And so there are information over there, and just go to the orchestra website and you'll find out.
That's great. And for everybody listening, that's tafelmusik.org, tafelmusik.org, October 28th. Also, make sure to check out the full coverage in October edition of Vanish International Magic Magazine. And I believe there's another article coming out as well. So amazing stuff. I can't wait for everybody to tune in and see the incredible work that both you have done on this amazing concert music magic film program. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.